All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the stream. I hope everybody out there is doing well tonight. We are picking up where we left off last night in our massive refactor effort and just sort of debugging our way through the remaining issues and fixing things along the way as we find them. We made some pretty decent progress in the last stream. I'm hoping that we make some pretty decent progress on this stream and can finally close the loop on this. So we'll see where we land. RCW, good to see you. Spiro, of course, the OG. How's it going? Good to see you guys. So before we jump into the stream, I do just want to take just a quick second and thank the supporters of the channel, starting with the partners who are the highest tier of subscription over on Patreon and YouTube memberships. They are Dustin Punt, Gabby Bashir, and Gabriels Inc. I would also like to thank all the other supporters listed here. They are a combination of the other tiers of support over on Patreon, YouTube memberships, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, I hope it goes without saying that I appreciate each and every one of you here with me live or looking at the vid or the VOD later on. So we do simulcast both to YouTube and Twitch, so I do keep an eye on both of those chats, and I do like chatting with you guys, so I encourage you to jump into the chat, say hi, ask a question if you have one. It is an interactive stream. So, Dr. Elliott, good to see you. How's it going? Thank you for the raid of 5 viewers. What did you get up to on stream tonight? We are actually just getting started over here tonight. And there's a shout out for Dr. Elliott. If you're not following Dr. Elliott, I would highly suggest you do so. Let me just make sure I am following you as well. There we are. Unreal Engine work, exploring the new animation stuff. I did hear that they came out with some new stuff, so that's pretty neat. So for those of you who are new to the channel, we are actually building a engine completely from scratch using C, and we are using Vulkan as our initial rendering backend. So just as a recap, this is a completely open source engine. It is free and open source. It is Apache 2.0 licensed, which means that you can use the engine either independently, commercially, as you see fit. And all that I ask is that you say that you used Kohi. That's literally it. It is royalty free. It is license free. There will never be any cost whatsoever to use this engine. It'll always be 100% free. It is open source, which means we have a GitHub repo where all the source lives, right? So typically the main branch is what we operate out of. Right now we're sort of operating out of a sub-branch of the 0.7 feature branch, which is going to be our next sort of release here. And so currently we're in the middle of a fairly large refactor effort, so I can't actually demo the engine at the moment because it doesn't run. But we're working on fixing that. So I'll also drop a link in chat for you guys as well. So the main project homepage is kohiengine.com. We have links here to obviously the GitHub repo, the YouTube channel, the Twitch channel that we're viewing now, which is also all the way at the bottom of the page. At least it's supposed to be. It's not loading for some reason. And basically the gist of this is that it started off as a tutorial series on YouTube. And we kind of stuck to that format for a while, and we tried a few different things in terms of formats with that, and ultimately tried out live streaming the development, and that's kind of where we landed and stayed. So, we do simulcast to both, so that you guys can access that on both locations. So we have all the links here to various things like our GitHub, Patreon if you want to support my work. We've got a Discord server that's got about 900 people on it, and so forth, right? We also have a few things like our API documentation that's constantly being updated, and things of that nature, right? So that is what we're working on here. Hope that all makes sense. Okay. So, with all of that out of the way, let's actually jump into some code here. So we've got some leftover or left off remarks rather, in terms of what we were thinking of doing when we ended the last stream, and that's kind of where we're going to pick up tonight. So essentially, the way that this was working before is we had this 9 slice that was being generated for various UI controls, such as a button and a text box, right? And that's literally just 9 individual slices of an image that are cut up, and that way you can resize a text box or a button without having its borders look stretched or squashed or anything like that. And so that is what we're sort of in the process of fixing. The way that it used to work would be it would generate sort of the geometry in the vertices and indices. It would sort of generate those, and then it would actually automatically upload it to the GPU as well. However, as part of our formatting, reorganization, we actually had moved this 9 slice to core, which no longer contains or knows anything about GPU or any of that stuff, right? That's all in the kohi runtime, right? So these libraries have been separated, namely so that we can use core for our other external utilities that we're going to be writing later on. And so we have to split those two things up for that reason, and realistically speaking, they probably should have been split up anyways. So that is what we're setting out to do right now, and then we'll sort of debug our way through that until we hit the next issue, and then we'll move on to there. All of that being said, we were also using a now deprecated sort of geometry config, and then an acquire from config that was actually performing the upload to the GPU. We have deprecated this method of actually working, and now we want to actually use the direct vertex and index buffers themselves. So at some point, we're going to wind up removing all of these geometry functions from the renderer because we just don't want to work that way, right? We want the renderer to be sort of as agnostic of the data that's being uploaded to it as possible. So if we need something more specific than that or more specialized than that, we're going to take that out of the renderer and put that somewhere else, right? All right, so what this was doing is, let's see, so generate 9 slice was basically taking in all these parameters about the size of the overall size of the 9 slice, some information about sampling from the texture coordinates or the texture itself, right, where it should actually sample those things from, and then it would output to a 9 slice structure, right? And so we're not going to be doing part of that anyways. So the way that this works is we were sort of building this geometry config, right? And then later on we were copying the items of that config over to this geometry structure here, which looks almost exactly the same anyways. So in thinking about this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, if we take a look at the actual struct itself, this is the geometry. I don't actually want that one. I want the 9 slice. Right, so if you look at the 9 slice itself, the 9 slice actually contains a pointer to geometry, and then contains some of the other dimensions that I was just talking about. And I think the way to handle this going forward is we are just going to literally track the vertex and index data on this object itself. That way we can just sort of interact with the renderer directly and not have to sort of go through this whole rigmarole of standing up this structure, standing up the other structure that we had here. We don't have to worry about that stuff, right? So that's kind of the goal. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go here, and we'll step over to geometry. And let's see, we've got a few different things here. So our geometry actually has an ID, a generation, which is used. It's incremented every time the geometry changes. That's how we can tell whether or not it has to be re-uploaded. It's got a center and extents, right? So that's in localized coordinates. So by default, the center would be 0, 0, 0, right? The origin. And then the extents would be the calculated extents of the maximum size of the geometry, right? In each axis. So we have a min and a max for that. We can use that to draw like bounding boxes, stuff like that. And then here's all the vertex information. So we have a vertex count, the size of each vertex, because that actually can matter. So if we're dealing with 2D data versus 3D data, that would change, right? And then we have the actual vertex data itself, right? And then a vertex buffer offset. So whenever we go to upload this to the vertex buffer, we actually have this, right? And then we have pretty much the same stuff for the indices, the count, element size, indices, and the offset. And then we also have a name array here, which is sort of the old way of doing names, right? We're not really doing that anymore either. And then it also has a reference to a material, which is kind of one of those things that I don't think we really need to be doing in most cases, right? There's not really a need to have a material, for example, for UI objects, right? That's more of a world thing. And so that's kind of the reason I wanted to get away from this, is because there were some assumptions that were being made about this that don't necessarily make sense. So I think what I'm going to do for right now is I'm actually just going to grab the fields that we care about, which is these guys. And we're going to go into our 9 slice, and we are going to come down here, and we're going to paste that in, right? And I realize, we're sort of going to be redefining this in a few different places. I've got some ideas on how I want to handle this. In fact, maybe we go ahead and define that now, since we're in the process of doing this anyways. So one thing that I like to look at is patterns for repetition, right? And eliminating those. So what do we see that we have here? We have 2 sets of data that are exactly the same in terms of types, right? The data that they hold, or the actual data underneath, might vary a little bit, but the shape of these is the same, right? So realistically, the collection of these things would be called like maybe buffer data, right? So your buffer data would be maybe your element count, your element size, your elements, and then your buffer offset, right, in bytes. And so if we make that generic and then, into a struct, right, then we just have 2 structs, one for index, one for vertex, right? And I think that makes a little bit more sense. And then perhaps, it might make sense in terms of the renderer to have an interface that deals with that. So let's head over to renderer types, not Vulkan types, renderer types. And so we also have this vertex or geometry render data, which is also something that probably needs to go away as well at some point. Let's see, where can we put this? Because this is a fairly large type, or a large file of types, right? So maybe we go all the way to the bottom of this. Well, I guess not quite to the bottom, because that's where our renderer interface is. You know what? No, I think I'm going to keep this towards the top, actually. I'm going to put this right above this guy. So we're going to type def a new struct, and we're going to call this render buffer data. Right? And then we're going to come over here, and we're going to grab these things, and we're going to come back over here, paste these guys, right? And we're going to rename this one to element count, right? How many elements we have. Element size, right? And then the elements themselves and the buffer offset, right? So we'll say the element count, the size of each element, the element data, and then the offset from the beginning of the buffer, right? So we can kind of keep that generic, so we're not repeating ourselves so much, right? So here we can just do render buffer data, and we can call this vertex data, and then render buffer data index data, right? And then all these go away. Unknown type name. Oh, there's a problem with that. The problem with that okay, I'm beginning to think that 9slice probably doesn't belong here, actually. So the problem with this is 9slice currently lives in core. But render types lives in runtime. So runtime references core. Core does not reference runtime, nor should it. So the more I think about this, like, what would we ever really use 9slices for outside of a renderer? I can't actually think of anything. Like, most of this other stuff kind of sort of makes sense. Like geometry, maybe, right? Because we can use geometry maybe when we're like loading up geometry data from a mesh file or something externally. Converting formats, something like that. But like a 9slice, I don't really see. So we might wind up actually moving that. All right, let me catch up on chat here. So it looks like I missed some messages. Mtastic, first time chat, welcome. Finally, someone from game dev that's not coding the game but the engine. Yeah, that's what we're doing. I mean, we're eventually going to make a game, right? But we're going to make a game with this engine. So we're going to kind of be doing both. So hello and welcome. Zed Hayes, how's it going? Good to see you again. Trash Can, good to see you as well. Pigeon Guided Missile, I love that username, by the way. Hats off to you, sir. Just found your YouTube series on this engine. It's fantastic. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's see. Sorry if I'm too direct. I have a few questions and would really like some input since there's not too much resources out there. Fire away. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Hasty Wasty, thank you for the follow. And Vertigo Royal, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Singy over on the YouTube side. Hello, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. All right. So if we were to move these over to the runtime, let me collapse this for a second. Where would we actually put? Let's see, because we have maybe 9slice should actually exist. Under the renderer, maybe? It's kind of a renderer type of thing. We wouldn't really use it outside of that. My initial thinking of keeping it in core was like, you have, types of geometry like planes, right? And I was thinking a 9 slice is kind of a type of geometry, but it's really more of a renderer concept, I guess. It's both, I guess. Do I want to put... I'm overthinking this. I think I'm just going to put it in the renderer for now. Let's just do that. So move that one and then move this one. Let's see. There we go. All right. So at this point, we can actually do an include of render types for these two structures, right? So the vertex render buffer data and the index render buffer data. That to me makes a lot more sense. Also, our naming scheme is totally not like it's not consistent at all. We should probably fix that while we're in here. It's a canvas type of thing. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of. It doesn't really have, I guess, a home yet, right? Let's see. Okay, so the questions are: I love art, been enjoying my time coding as well, but I want to do both. Not sure what I can do here, and I heard something about technical art, but where do I start? Not even sure at all. Nothing is solid. Everything on YouTube is just scope and salary, not actual resources. Okay. Do I have to enter an industry to learn this? I don't get it at all. I feel like a lot of gatekeeping is still in this world. Open documentation on YouTube is happening. Yes. Okay. So I can actually provide a little bit of insight there because I pitched myself as a technical artist for a while before I actually fully switched to programming. So a technical artist is a bit of a mix of programming and art, more heavily focused on art. Sometimes technical artists will also do like scripting. They usually don't do like engine programming and that kind of stuff. But they'll do like rigging and skinning and stuff like that as well. Not necessarily the animation all the time, although that can sometimes be included. But they usually do the kind of super technical stuff that some of the super creative artists don't always understand, right? They tend to jump into the more technical aspects and sort of act as a liaison between the non-technical artists and the technical programmers, right, or the devs. And so that is a little bit of a challenge to find, like in terms of like what specifically to learn. The best way that I would say to get that list of things that you would want to learn is actually look up job listings for technical artists. And look at, you could look at large companies, small companies, what have you. But a lot of them will actually list off the specific things that they're looking for. And so that's probably the way that I would approach like figuring out what to learn, right? And then that'll also give you an idea. It's like, well, do I really want to do all these things, or do I absolutely hate rigging and I don't really want to do that and I want to do something else? Or do you really like programming and you feel like maybe technical art is not going to be as much programming as you like, right? So everybody's definition of technical artist is a little bit different, which is also why it's kind of hard to find info on that. Yeah, let me know if that doesn't answer your question. And I could try and go into a little bit more detail. Blistered X, first time chat. Hello. Welcome. Is there a specific reason for developing in C instead of C++? Yes, preference. I prefer C because it's a simpler language. Most of the features of C++ I wasn't using anyways. Things like OOP and overloading and stuff like that, I don't use any of that stuff. Templates, no thank you. So I kind of was doing what I called C++ Lite for a while, which is C style C++. And then I was like, well, if I'm doing that, why not just try writing this thing in C, right? So I switched to C and wound up loving it and never looked back. It also compiles a hell of a lot faster because it's a much simpler language. So there's that too. I was official. Good to see you. I hope you're doing all right. Good to see you again. Fantastic. Oh, I hate rigging and animation though. Yeah, see? And some companies look for people specifically to do that, but a lot of times technical art will get roped into doing rigging, right? So you gotta balance that out. I would definitely say though, look at job listings for specific sets of criteria that they're looking for. So if you're more into environment art and making materials, the environment artist is a thing, like on its own. So yeah, if that's more up your alley, then you might want to look into that. And sometimes environmental artists can also, sort of work with, the game scripters to sort of, I guess, build the environment, right? The dynamic elements of the environment. Never heard of the technical artist term? Yeah, it's pretty wide role. It's actually pretty hard to find good technical artists, believe it or not. You've always considered programming an art, even if professionally it's more industrialized and less creative. Yeah, I mean, it is, I guess, an art form, right? It's a form of expression. Although, if you're working for a large company, you're heavily limited on what kind of expression you can have, personal expression on that, because you generally have to follow, predefined sets of rules and whatnot. But yeah, I wouldn't disagree on that. Swift over on YouTube. Hello, how's it going? Hope you're well. Okay, so the 9 slice exists here now. So there's a bit of a separation of concern. Actually, you know what? Now that this exists here, I don't know that we have to separate this stuff out. We could probably leave it as is. We could still get rid of the old sort of geometry way of doing things, but I think we might actually be able to leave this implementation largely as it was, which is actually not what I intended, but it actually kind of makes more sense now that we've moved it over to the runtime, right? It has access to the renderer. Maybe we just leave that well enough alone. So let's go with 9 slice C, right? And maybe this just is the way that we handle it. Minus this bit, right? We're still going to get rid of this bit in this geometry config stuff. So let's rename this first. And we're going to call this 9 slice update. Right? And then let's go with, this is really more of a 9 slice create, actually. Some of this stuff was made before we actually had sort of standards behind this stuff in terms of naming, which is why it's so different. Okay, so update frame prepare. I think that works. The only other thing that we actually don't have is we don't have a 9 slice destroy. right? Which would just take a 9 slice, right? We have no way to sort of destroy that. So that's definitely something that we should have. Should also have ad break right now because there's ads and we have to pay the Bezos. All right, so for those of you who are on the YouTube side and those of you who can still hear me over on the Twitch side, we're served Twitch ads once every 30 minutes for up to 90 seconds. So I like to actually pause the stream so that nobody misses anything, because especially in a programming stream, that's not ideal, right? To have something taking up the full screen and overriding the audio and you can't see or hear what's going on, right? So I just pause the stream so that nobody misses anything, and then we'll pick back up. So Sizzlard Crucible, I probably pronounced that wrong, but I see your question and I will answer that when we come back from the ad break, just so that everybody can see it. So we've got about 30 seconds left on ads, a little bit less, and then we'll be good to go. Let's see. It looks like we got a couple Twitch comments as well. So, okay. So, can I show how the engine looks so far? Unfortunately, I can't do a live demo, but what I can do is show a couple of screenshots that we have on the GitHub repo, which actually these screenshots are a little bit old at this point. I need to update them. But we do have a PBR pipeline. So there are some aspects of that are missing. We have adjusted the lighting and shadows a little bit. So it does look a little bit better than this now. Excuse me. But yeah, this is kind of what our test application looks like right now in Kohi. So we've got a scene graph with selectable objects that we can move around with a gizmo, which actually isn't pictured here. And we have a basic PBR pipeline set up in terms of our renderer. Right now, we're using a forward renderer via a configurable render graph, which is one of the things that we're setting up now. And eventually, we're going to have both a deferred and a forward plus render option available as well. And you'll basically be able to configure a render graph to use any one of those or a combination of them, technically, if you wanted to. And so that's kind of where we're at the moment anyways. So I hope this helps. I realize it's not like a live demo, but we are in the middle of a fairly large refactor effort, just to eliminate a lot of technical debt that we accrued in the beginning of the series because it was a tutorial series. And the way that I had to structure some things there wasn't necessarily ideal for the end sort of runtime. So we're kind of cleaning some of that stuff up now. Let's see. I was thinking about your project the other day, and I want to ask if there's in-game console there in your engine. Yes, there is. Yep, it's like a drop-down console. Yeah, there is. Yeah, when you press tilde. Yep. So our basic UI system just has a few controls right now that we leverage to do that. And yeah, we do have one. I unfortunately don't have it pictured here, and I can't run it. But if you hang around for a few more streams, when I do get this up and running again, I can show that, right? Or actually, I'm sure you could probably go back in the archives on the YouTube channel and find that. So we actually used our custom UI system to actually build a debug drop-down list. And it's interactive. You can enter commands in it and stuff and register commands to work with it. We are going to enhance that as time goes on. It's just very basic right now, but it does work. So let's see. Let me catch up over on the Twitch side, and then we'll get back to it. Is getting your engine ready for 3D the same as getting it ready for 2D? Like have one interface for both, for UI, game objects, and components. Do they use the same pipeline, buffer, and ilk? That is highly reliant on what you're going to do. I would say, generally speaking, they're not going to use the same pipeline, right? Because, like, generally speaking, with 3D applications, you have dynamic lighting and things like that, whereas 2D, you don't have that, right? So your shader setup, your vertex data, all that stuff's going to be different, right? However, if you set your renderer up right, it shouldn't matter, right? So we actually set our stuff up in such a way where you could do 2D and 3D rendering using the same renderer interface, and just basically switch shaders and swap what you draw when. And, you know, it basically works. So for example, in this screenshot here, right, we draw the 3D scene, right, and using like a 3D pipeline that we set up, but the UI is strictly 2D. That's drawn in the order that, you know, it's layered in the order that the objects are drawn, right? So it's two different pipelines, two different configurations, but all using the same renderer. So you just have to, if you're going to do that, you have to be thinking about that when you set up your renderer, more or less. Caesar88, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. Want to get into the waters to see what fits me. If it's game tool making, or just get a head start, to be honest, push myself and see if it's something I like. Might just make a LinkedIn account and drop questions to a few people as a last resource. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, just jump in and maybe make a couple of games in Unreal or something, right? Or Godot, and see if you like it. See what aspects of it you like, what aspects of it you hate, right? And maybe go from there. What's eating the FPS on those screenshots? We have not optimized anything at all. At all, in terms of the renderer. So one of the things that we're doing horribly wrong with this is we have cascading shadow maps, and we have 4 cascades that are running currently, and all of those cascades are 2K shadow maps, and we are drawing every single object in the scene for each one of those cascades. Regardless, like, we're not really calling it correctly right now. And we're also not optimizing our draw calls. So this Sponza scene right here actually has, I forget what, it's like 300 and some odd sub-meshes in it that aren't batched either. And part of the reason I did that was because I wanted to see, you know, hitting it with a bunch of draw calls, what actually it does, right? So we're not doing any sort of batching yet, for one thing. Batching is going to be a huge optimization when we get there. And that's probably something I'm going to tackle after we do the first game with this, because the first game is going to be simple enough that's not going to matter. And then we'll add batch rendering, and that's going to be a huge boon to the FPS, right? For sure. But yeah, we haven't really optimized this stuff at all. We sort of got these features in and working, and then sort of moved on, right? So we're going to have to do a pretty large optimization pass. We also don't have things like SIMD in our math library, right? So we have some work to do for sure. What's the difference between a forward and deferred renderer? That is a loaded question that I'm not prepared to answer at the moment. We did talk about that a little bit further back in the series. Let's just suffice it to say that a forward renderer, you basically have to draw the entire scene once per light source that you have, versus a deferred renderer, you separate out the lighting from the actual scene draw. And so it's a huge optimization, right? But it does not work with transparent objects, whereas forward rendering does. And then you have forward plus, which is like a weird combination of the two, right? So that's a very high level explanation of it, but that's basically it. Noob question, what does the K API in front of the function signatures do? I see other C projects out there with macros like that, but I never understood the benefits or what could be done with that. Okay, so I can touch on that really quickly. All this is is, and it depends on what compiler we're using. If we're using Visual Studio, right, you might have heard of this declspec DLL export, right? This basically means that you are exporting that symbol to be loaded by an external library, right, or application. So when you build this is mostly used in libraries, right, shared libraries. It's basically saying I want other libraries to be able to have visibility of this thing to use it, right? So if you're using Visual Studio, it's called declspec and then DLL export. If you're using Clang or GCC, it's visibility default attribute that you tack onto it. And the difference is MSVC by default makes all of your symbols private, and GCC and Clang by default make everything visible by default. And so I had to set up specific rules so that they function the same way across all of those, because those things are overridable. And so this is a way for me to say, okay, I do want to export this thing, right? And then if you are actually building a consumer, either library or application, it actually treats that as an import for Visual Studio, right? So it changes declspec DLL import. And then Clang and GCC don't need that. So depending on whether you're building a library or whether you're building the end executable, we actually have switches that we flip, which is kexport and kimport, which I think is just an else here. Yeah, which is right there. So if we're exporting, which all of our libraries do, then that is essentially replaced by this, saying, yes, we do want anything with this to be visible to things outside of that library that are trying to load it. Hope that makes sense. Where would I even start making tool for, let's say, Unreal Engine or Unity? So that's a bit difficult, right? Because you really have to know those engines in order to make an external tool set for them, right? Generally speaking, when you're a tools developer, you're filling in the gap for something that engine doesn't provide that you need. In a lot of cases, in a lot of studios, that'll be because they've got a proprietary way they need their data handled, right? So you're not necessarily going to run into that type of a situation there. Just doing stuff on your own. What you might want to do is, like I said, it kind of requires a little bit of experience building games using those engines to begin with. And then you'll sort of see the sort of weak points or the annoying parts to say, well, why can't I do this in Unreal? And then you'll start to sort of dig into the API documentation and figure out how you might extend the engine to actually do those things. But there's not really, well, I'm sure there's tutorials out there on how to actually do it, but there's not really a blanket answer for that, unfortunately. What language do you start? Python, C++, or C#? So C++ is industry standard for game development, right? Unless you're using Unity, which uses C# as its scripting language. So that would be my answer there. C and or C++. Noodle mixing sound. First time chat, welcome, by the way. IRC or Go.Discord is great for this sort of thing. Don't use LinkedIn for that. Yeah, that's good advice. Yep. Wonderful answer for the screenshot. Yeah. I try understanding these things looking at your code, and I just can't for the love of me. How many years did it take you to be able to mentally connect each and every part of the render engine, like you know what's missing if there's a bug? I want to be able to do that. Quite truthfully, well over a decade. I've built dozens of engines on my own. I've built some commercially. This is the first engine of this size that I've built with Vulkan, but I've built lots of engines with OpenGL, right? And a lot of those concepts sort of carry over. And so each time I built one of those things, I kind of took lessons from it and learned things along the way. This one included. And that's just kind of the way it works, right? You get that experience just by doing it. And don't be afraid to throw away your code. If something doesn't work the way that you anticipated, throw it out and rewrite it. That's just the way it is. You just have to keep plugging along at it, get your hands dirty. How many years did it take you to do X? I'll tell you when I get there. Yeah, right. Not entirely inaccurate. Let's see. Did you take any inspiration from the Quake 3 engine? It is also written in C, although it uses OpenGL. So, architecturally speaking, yes, but I don't use any of the code from any of that. Part of the reason is because those engines are all licensed under GPL. So if you use any part of that source code, not only do you have to license your source code as GPL, but that means that anybody that uses your code also has to license their code as GPL and has to make it open source, right? Which obviously for folks that are running a game dev studio, they're not going to want to open source their games, right? So I didn't go down that route in terms of like using any code examples from any of that stuff whatsoever. For that reason, it's great to read, but be careful. Be careful if you use it for inspiration, right? Have you noticed any differences in performance using GCC, Clang, and MSVC in your practice? Yes. I like Clang the best. I think, okay, wait a minute. There's two aspects of this. So you're talking runtime performance, or are you talking compilation speed, like that kind of performance? Clang and GCC far, far better than MSVC. Runtime, okay. So in terms of runtime, I've not seen huge differences yet, to be completely honest. I have noticed that my frame rate is generally a little bit higher on Linux than it is on Windows. But I use Clang across the board. So I don't really know what that means. It could be driver issues as well. It's hard to quantify, right? The only thing I would say is, like, if I'm testing like brute force performance, it would have to be things that only run on the CPU that don't use any platform specific functions or hacks for anything, right? Let's see. Thank you guys for the follows, by the way. I appreciate that. Makes real sense. Thanks. All right, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for paving the way for us newbies. This is such a blessing to see in real time. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of trying to create the resource that I wish I had when I was learning this stuff, right? And part of what I feel is the benefit of doing this, right, is I feel like too many tutorials out there are sort of very sterile and very sort of, preconceived and very curated and very, perfect from start to finish, right? And the reason I switched to live format is so that you guys can see my screw ups, right? I screw up all the time, right? I get things wrong all the time. And that's the reality of development, right? Nobody's perfect. And so you guys kind of get to see when I screw those things up and when I don't find them sometimes for a month, or until a month later, and then have to debug through it, and then you guys will, kind of see the process that I go through with that stuff, right? Best way to learn to program is to program. Sulfoam, you're on point with that. That is what I always say. Get your hands dirty and just do it. Write code. It's the single fastest way to get good at a programming language. Can you give advice for creating a REST API in C? I haven't done it, so no. I can't. I've not created a REST API in C. So unfortunately, I would not be the person to ask about that. other than hypotheticals. Try to run Vulkan on my Android as a learning exercise. Boy, Trashcan, I will tell you, you are a glutton for punishment if that's where you're going to start. That's all I'll say about that. All right. So instead of creating this out config, let's see, we should probably also have, we created this new type, this render buffer data, right? But maybe, I was gonna say maybe we have a function to like set all the properties at once, but I don't think it's gonna be worth it. We're gonna have to do it anyways. So let's just do, let's delete this. And we'll change this to out 9 slice vertex data element size, right? And this is the way that we'll sort of set this up. So we'll do out 9 slice vertex data. And actually, I'm just gonna cheat and do that one more time, and then we're going to do element count in elements, right? And then we'll just do the same thing here. So out 9 slice index data, right? And this will be element size, element count, and elements, right? Yeah, and then all we need to do is use these things twice. Maybe I should just save myself all of the repetitiveness here. Let's do const u32 vert size equals size of vertex 2D. Const u32 vert count equals 4 times 9, right? And then I could just say this, right? Vert size, vert counts, right? And then we can do the same thing here. So const u32 idx size equals size of u32. Const u32 idx count equals 6 times 9. And then we do idx size, idx count, idx size times idx count, right? And then we don't have the name anymore, so we're not going to worry about that, right? So now we're actually setting this stuff up directly in the structure itself. The only other thing that we need to do is we'll do out 9 slice vertex data buffer offset, and we're going to set that to, I think that's a U64, right? Yeah, it's a U64. So we're going to say equals invalid ID U64. And the reason I'm doing that is because it'll be super obvious to us in code, or as we're debugging, that we've not set that value, right? Because none of our buffers are going to be that big. So out9 slice indexed data buffer offset equals invalid ID U64, right? All right, let's see. Lokita, first time chat, welcome. Hey, thanks for the tutorials. No problem. Started watching your Kohi engine series on YouTube. It's amazing. Can you answer me one question? Why did you choose C instead of C++? I work as a web dev, but in love with graphics. So I probably ought to like have a frequently asked question, because like I think that's probably the number one question that I get, which is funny. But my primary reason for choosing C over C++ is preference. I have several reasons for that. I don't use most of the features that C++ gives in terms of object-oriented programming. I don't use things like overloads. I don't use templates. I don't use all that stuff, right? C is a much simpler language. It's faster to compile, and I just prefer it. I was using what I call C++ Lite anyways. And that's just C style C++. And I'm like, well, if I'm doing that, I might as well just write C. And so I did. Let's see. Done a bit on Windows, looking for jobs in the Android Kotlin area. So I guess it'll be good in some way. Yeah, okay. So if you're going to do that, trash can, that totally makes sense. 100%. Let's see. Not to distract you, but do you have any interesting hobbies, drones, D&D, etc., outside of being a coding demigod? I'm not a coding demigod, definitely not. No. I appreciate the thought process there, but so I used to be a drummer. I used to be a metal drummer, but I had to give that up because of joint issues. My joints couldn't take it anymore. I know, becoming an old man. It's because I have what's called psoriatic arthritis. So that is a condition that is coupled with psoriasis. And it basically not only attacks your skin and makes you have these weird patches all over the place, but it also attacks your joints, and it hurts. And I couldn't take the impact anymore. So yeah, I used to be a metal drummer, played in a few bands back in the day. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've been able to do it. Outside of that, I do enjoy taking care of the vegetable garden that we have out back in my house with the wife. That's been a lot of fun to do. It's sort of like a side little hobby as well. I also had another channel for a while that was dedicated to like car stuff that I did. But yeah, that's about it, I guess. At least that's what I can think of right now. Quote, object-oriented programming is an exceptionally bad idea, which could only have originated in California. Chickstra. That's great. I love that. Yeah, no problem, Lokita. Yeah, so Soulfoam, like, I really agree with you on that about modern C++. I'm not a fan of it at all. It's so, like, feature creeped and complicated, but it is what it is. You love metal drums? Wish you had space for a drum set? Yeah, I do. I can't play it anymore. Metal fan? Yes, I'm a big metal fan. It's actually blocked by my green screen, but yeah, I have like metal records and stuff up on my my shelf behind me. Yeah, Huey, don't let that dissuade you, right? Like people are very either for or against C++. You're going to find people that use C++ every day that absolutely hate it, right? But the fact of the matter is, it's the industry standard for game dev, right? So if game dev is what you want to do, or low level systems programming, more than likely you're going to be doing it in C++, whether you like it or not. Sergeant Pepper's offended as a Californian. That's funny. Let's see. Awesome to hear. Like to see the car stuff, and I'll pray about your conditions. Hate to hear that part. I appreciate that. We have ads. And pop culture, I will answer that when we come back from ads. You can get pretty offensive in C++, yeah. Agreed. Just look at what was it? The Chrono library and all the name spacing nightmares that go along with that. And then if you template any of that stuff, oh god. It's almost as verbose as Vulkan at that point. Got about 20 seconds left. All right, ads are done. So, what kind of metal? I appreciate lots of types of metal, actually. So, all the way up from the classic stuff like your Metallica, your Megadeth, your Anthrax, that kind of thing. Pantera, right? All that kind of stuff. Sepultura, that's another one. But I also like a little bit of newer stuff too out there, like Trivium, Killswitch Engage, some of the melodic stuff, In Flames, especially Old In Flames, that kind of stuff. Good stuff. I could go on and on and on. Brazil mentioned, I knew you would like that one, Trash Can. If Taman was here, he'd probably know about that one too. Yeah, great bands. Yep, exactly. In Flames is amazing. Yeah, I actually got to see them live. What was that, last month? Which was really cool. But yeah, they've been one of my favorite bands since college. Which I hate to say was a while ago for me. Aging myself again. Dang it. All right. Oh, you missed their show there. Dang it. Yeah, they don't tour that often, or at least not down this way. Not to the US, anyway. Eloy on Slipknot. Any Angra enjoyers? I don't mind a little Angra. I'm alright with that. Saw In Flames years ago. Yeah. In Flames is a big favorite of mine, for sure. They just have so many bangers, Let's see. First time chats. Caesar88. Could you enable subtitles to watch your streaming? Subtitles. Like automatic subtitles? Is that a thing? Does YouTube do that now? Or Twitch? Let me see. I don't know if that's I don't remember seeing that option in here. Could be at another time. You know what? I'm going to write that down. Because I haven't even, thought of that. don't know if there's like real-time subtitles available or not, but I'm gonna write that down. Like, I know YouTube will auto-generate them on uploaded videos, but I don't know if they have anything that's live. It's probably a plugin. Yeah, might be. Easiest way to add captions to a Twitch stream is to use OBS and the closed captioning via Google Speech Recognition plugin. Interesting. Okay. I'm gonna write that down too. Thank you for that. I'll look into it. I will definitely look into that. Oh, wait a minute. We have another Brazilian. Awesome. And another one, right? Did I see that twice? Do I listen to Brugeria? No. I've not. I guess I haven't heard of them, but I have their stuff pulled up on another tab, so I'll listen to it offline. I think my my Brazilian audience is still holding it strong at like 15%. There's a lot of you guys out there. Appreciate you. All right. So we filled that out. Indices, do we really need... This is really just going to be... out9 slice index data. Elements. So we set up the indices. We call 9slice updates. What is this? This takes in the vertices, the vertex array. Okay, so this needs to be out9slice vertex data elements. All right, get rid of that. All right, so this is what we want to replace. And then, let's see, we use the same arrays as for the config. Okay, so we don't need to do this. This is something that's obsolete. We don't need that anymore. So what we need to do is basically replicate what's going on in this function in here. So if we do geometry system acquire from config, create geometry. Okay, so we have a renderer geometry create and then send the geometry off to be uploaded. So what does this even do? Sets the generation, sets all this stuff which we already have. Okay, so that actually doesn't do anything meaningful for us. What we're actually interested in is what this is doing. So is reupload, let's see. So is reupload is, we do a check on the generation. Do we have... Do we not have generation? We do not. So should we store a generation counter on the 9slice? I'm going to say no. because anytime that we wait a minute, 9 slice update. This doesn't upload to, does it? I don't think it does, but no. Okay. So this just recalculates all the texture coordinates and vertex positions. Okay. All right, so we do need to run that first, and then the actual upload happens here. So we'll do let's actually just copy all of this. I'm not going to need all of this, but this is basically what we're going to be doing. So we're not going to track re-uploads, right? It's just going to always do this, because this is on create, so we need to perform an allocation here, right? So we need that. We need to include the renderer front end. We need a render buffer pointer. So in this case, we're going to get the renderer. Don't we have a we have allocate load range. Sure, we've got to have a way to actually obtain that here. Surely we do. Render buffer get. That is what I want right there. Okay, so we need to do this. We need to get the render buffer first. Right, so we'll say vertex buffer is equal to that, right? And then we'll do render buffer type vertex, right? So that'll get us the vertex buffer. Then we can do vertex buffer there. Allocates. I think that's the total size. Yes. So that's going to wind up being IDX, or it's going to be vert size times vert count for that one. Mtastic, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. So this is going to be vert size times vert count for that. And then the offset is going to be the address of out 9 slice vertex data buffer offset, right? So we do all of that. I can close this window. So we do all of that. That'll allocate us space in the buffer. Then we need to actually load the data. Which I believe that false that we're talking about here is directly having to do with including in the frame workload, which we may or may not. Actually, didn't we? I think we rewrote the backend to be intelligent about that. Let's see. Render buffer load range. So the load range I think in here maybe not, maybe not. Okay, so how should we I guess it's fine to include it in framework load, but... So for a little context on what that is. Vertex buffer, we don't need the address of that. Let me fill out the rest of these. G vertex buffer offset plus vertex offset. It should just be out9 slice vertex data offset. This was vert size, and then load range. What was that other parameter there? The data to be loaded. Okay, so the data to be loaded is just going to be out9 slice vertex data elements. And there shouldn't be any sort of offset on that, right? From the beginning of the buffer, but not in the beginning of the data. Yes, okay, all right, so I got my parameters right. All right, so what this last one is we have an optimization in place where we can basically say if we are doing this operation in the middle of, or at the beginning of a frame load, or a frame drawing process, right? Instead of launching up a separate queue to perform the upload of this geometry to the GPU, instead of running through like a separate queue execution for that, we can actually tack this on to the beginning of the current frame that's being drawn as part of the work that goes into actually drawing that frame. And the benefit is that a lot of times doing that is less overhead because you're not actually standing up another command buffer and executing or performing another queue execution. So it's generally faster, if you can, to do this as part of the frame workload as opposed to trying to do it separately. Now, for some reason, this was defaulting to false. And this was saying it should be offloaded to another queue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to true with a note. Offload was set to false. Right, and we'll test that. And then if we run into an issue with this, we'll know why. Let's see. Taman, how's it going? Speaking of Brazilians. Good to see you. Sakelis Music, good to see you as well. How are you doing? Yes, you mentioned another Brazil mentioned event for sure. A couple of them, actually. Sorry, I had an internet blip. Back now, dropping a follow before heading back to bed. Thank you for the advice and your input. I appreciate that, Fantastic. Appreciate that a lot. There's so many of us here, by the way. Long time no see. Yeah. Petition for Travis to learn Portuguese. Well, okay, but you should specify Brazilian Portuguese because I know that's different than Portuguese from Portugal. Another day, another something. Been working on audio for most of the day. Nice. Audio is one of those things that, like, I wish I had the talent to sort of create on my own, right? But I can do the programming for it, but writing music and making sound effects is not my forte. Brazilian Portuguese is the correct Portuguese, am I right? I mean, according to this audience, I would say yes. Alrighty, Swift, good to see you. Thanks for joining, and have a good one. Daniel Stevens, still enjoying the streams. How are you using secondary command buffers, if at all? I'm not currently using them. And this may be an instance where maybe that makes sense to actually use one. But I'm not currently using them. can't stress how big of a nightmare it would be for a foreigner to learn European Portuguese. I mean, how hard could it be, right? I learned enough Japanese to go to Japan and be able to ask people for directions and understand the response. So, how hard could that be? I can actually read a lot more than I can speak or write. You say this because of the accent? That's fair. That might be the part I struggle with, actually. Just need a phrase or two? Yeah. That's probably true. Let's see. Is it pretty difficult to get into OpenGL from zero level of graphics programming? I don't think so. I think the only thing you have to be careful with OpenGL is if you're going to look up some tutorials or read about it, make sure that you do modern OpenGL, because there's a lot of antiquated stuff out there that goes into sort of the old OpenGL like 1 or OpenGL 2 way of doing things, which is very different than modern OpenGL. So just be careful of that. Like, you'll want to look for anything that's OpenGL 3.3 plus, I would say. Oh, Australian, nice. That's quite the time difference from where I am in the US. Okay, Sergeant Pepper, I actually understood way more of that than I thought I would, and I don't know French. I don't understand why, but my brain just kind of filled a lot of it in. I think the Portuguese in the Napoleon era tried to speak like the French for the prestige. Ended up turning it into a really weird accent. That's fair. It's kind of like how British people used to speak like Americans do now. All right, index data if applicable. So that is not something we have to check on. We also don't have to check on re-uploads of index data because that's not a thing. We do need to get the render buffer, so let's grab that. So we're going to call this index buffer. Right, so we'll get the index buffer, and then we're going to allocate, and we're going to do index buffer, and that's going to be IDX size, and that's going to be IDX size times IDX count, and then where we're going to stuff the offset is going to be out 9 slice index data buffer offset, right? We should probably change this. We're just going to say failed to upload 9 slice vertex data to the vertex buffer. And I'm actually just going to take this, put this down here, change this to index, and index. After 3 days, I would be tired of eggs and cheese. That's hilarious. All right. Okay, so we allocate space for the index buffer, and then we need to basically repeat this operation. So I'm going to put the same note here for this guy, and index buffer, and then we need out 9 slice index data buffer offsets. Wait a minute. This needs to be vert size times vert count. This needs to be IDX size times IDX count. And then for this one, we just need the data, so that's going to be out9 slice, index data, elements. And then we're going to flip this over to true, right? Wait. Oh, what a dingus. I put that in the wrong spot. So this should be fail to allocate from the index buffer. And then this would be allocate from the vertex buffer. Okay. Make sure I get my error messages correct. Okay. So I'm pretty sure geometry upload. I think that's all we needed, right? We could increment the generation, but we're not actually storing that. And for a 9 slice, I don't actually think that matters. Okay, so that can go away. And we're good as far as that goes. So the only other bit is this bit, which is basically saying if we have performed updates to the 9 slice that we need to re-upload that geometry. It's me, Zach. Thank you for the follow, as well as Plagued Firmware. Appreciate that. And Zenetics. And Ungerfall. Thank you for the follows. I appreciate that, guys. Let's see. I've recently started to love and embrace assert. So basically, I always assert when I do allocations or basic stuff and let my program crash. Feels much better than individual error handling. Yeah, it depends on what I'm doing. But I will say that while you're developing, assertions are great. But when you're actually shipping software, right, that other people are going to use as a library, I always try to avoid crashing like the plague. So I basically never want my engine to crash, and I never want my game to crash. So any of that stuff that's user-facing that could potentially ever go into production, those types of places I will never use asserts for that reason, right? I always want it to sort of gracefully fail and move on if possible. Now, obviously, if it's something like an allocation failed, then yeah, you're kind of screwed. There's not much you can do about that. But yeah, I always try to avoid crashing if it's something that's going to be ultimately user-facing or going to be shipped as part of production. Since all other programming languages also crash in errors like this. Yep. It's just a simple game server I'm writing and not an OS kernel. Linus would kill me if I wrote code like this. Yeah. I mean, I get it though, right? So question, how long does it take to learn Vulkan and get flexible with it for a new one? Start with OpenGL or Vulkan. So that depends on how much graphics programming experience you have, which it doesn't sound like you're there yet if you're asking that question. So what I normally tell people is if you are learning graphics programming, start with OpenGL to get the concepts down, but then quickly move on to Vulkan once you have those concepts down. Reason being is because OpenGL is it's a deprecated library. It's not being updated anymore. It's not obsolete, right? It's not like it still works, but it's not going to be updated anymore, and it won't be updated in the future. So the quicker you get away from that, the better, in my opinion. unless you're making something super
Thanks
small,
for the
right?
series, dude. Kohi is amazing.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Riacho. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you for the Prime sub. Thank you. That means a lot. We're gonna have ads here in just a minute. Speaking of which, I guess for the other half of your question, by the way, is how long does it take? Vulkan takes a very long time. It took me years to wrap my head around it, quite honestly. OpenGL, not so much. OpenGL, you can wrap your head around in probably a few months if you're going at it pretty hardcore. So we got about 50 seconds left on ads. Carmenzod, thank you for the Carmanazod, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome. So we're just on the ad break right now. We got about 30 seconds left, and then we can continue. All right, ads are done. So question from Bishwas over on YouTube. How long have you been writing the game engine? So it's a little bit of a loaded answer, but the short answer is I've been working on this project now for about 3 years, but it is not full-time 3 years, right? So I can only dedicate maybe 10, 15 hours a week max on working on the engine. So if you were to extrapolate that out to like actual, like if I were going at this hardcore, it would probably be like 6 months worth of work, realistically. 6 to 8 months worth of work, I would say. So yeah, it's been going on a long time, but there's lots of overhead working on this series too, because especially in the beginning, because I had edited YouTube videos that had to be made to go along with this, and that took a lot of time as well. And of course the overhead with running a stream and stuff like that, it's not all just, straight up dev time. But I haven't really logged the time, so I don't have an exact answer, but it's probably around 6 months of actual dev time. Yarmolenko 220, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Barely usable. Are you a game dev as a job, or is the game part of it a hobby? So I was previously. I was in the industry for about 5 years writing game engines. And then, frankly, I got tired of the hours and the constant grind, and just went on to something different. So now I write medical software as my day job, right? And I keep this as my passion. Because I was kind of running into a situation where, because of the grind that I was having to do at that particular job, it was making me hate it a little bit, right? And I didn't want that to happen, so I made a change, right? And I'm keeping it as my hobby, as my passion. And the only way that I'm going to, for me personally, and I'm not saying this is right for everybody, but for me personally, the only way that I'm going to develop games from now on is for myself, right? I'm not going to do that as part of somebody else's vision. I want to do that as part of my own vision, right? So I hope that makes sense. Do you write medical software in C? No, unfortunately. Do you do 3D imaging by chance? No, unfortunately. No, that would be neat, but the sector of software that I do is it's the electronic health records software that hospitals use, more or less. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this fix me. And we have render geometry vertex update. Okay, so this what is this function doing? I have a feeling I know what it's doing, and I think it's nothing but doing a simple update on the range of the render buffer. Yep. So this is another reason I got rid of this, right? We've deprecated this because this is all it's really doing. So let's go ahead and grab that. And we'll upload the new vertex data using, if I can stop hitting the wrong buttons, that'd be great. Let's see. All right, so essentially what we want to call is render buffer load range against the vertex buffer. We don't need to update the indices. We only need to update the verts, right? And this is because if our 9 slice is dirty, that means that it's been resized potentially, right? So that means that we need to update that vertex data, which means that we need this guy. Right, so we'll throw that in there. So vertex buffer. And then the offset is going to be within the 9 slice itself. So that's going to be n slice vertex data offset, buffer offset rather. The size is actually going to be, in this case we actually know this data, but I think I'm still going to, I think I'm going to copy this anyways. So for the size, actually, you know what, we'll just do n slice vertex data element size times n slice vertex data element count, right? So that's the total size. Let's see, vertices plus offset. Okay, so this is going to be the data itself. So that's going to be n slice vertex data elements, and then include in frame workload we are going to say true. Right? Okay, so we could delete that. That's the replacement for that. And there we go. Now, this actually makes me think, though. Technically, when we're creating this, this could happen at any time, not necessarily in the middle of a frame. Whereas this vertex update here can happen, or typically happens right before a frame is rendered, right at the beginning. So we should be offloading that workload to the frame workload. But I'm actually thinking these other two places where we were questioning whether we should do that, I think they should not be doing that, now that I think about it. Because this could be happening asynchronously from anywhere. So we should probably be executing that in like a simple queue, just a one-off for that. And that's not really something, like, we're only going to do it that way when we actually first create a 9 slice, so it only happens once. So I'm okay with paying that cost. Okay, so we're not using these headers. Let's get rid of those. And I think we might be done with this file. Right. We need to clean because we have old objects that aren't getting built. And then SUI text box is actually now pointing to the math 9 slice in the wrong place. So SUI text box, get rid of that, and I wonder if this will work. It did pick it up. Cool. Build that. SUI text box C. Looks like it has some issues. Update 9 slice. Okay, so we renamed that, but apparently this file didn't catch it. All right, and we renamed this as well. All right, we have 7 errors, which looks like most of them are going to be here. Oh, this was the other half of our conversion, right? So our 9 slice crate is actually going to upload this as well. So note uploads, also uploads to the GPU. So actually we can get rid of all of this. All right, so the clip mask, I'm going to leave that doing that the old way for now. We can come back and fix that once we get everything running. Okay, SUI button is going to be the same thing, so oh, why did it do that? All right, naming things, okay. So this is going to be 9 slice updates. And then 9 slice creates. Slice updates. Same as that one. Same with that one. Okay. All right, so we're building successfully again. So let's debug real quick and see what kind of stuff we hit. Okay. So it looks like shader resource acquisition is not cooperating for some reason. So what are we seg faulting on? Oh, the shader itself. That's fun. Okay. Shadow render graph node. Let's Let's see, load resources. Did we not? I thought we did get the actual shader here. Yeah, we should have. I don't think we got any errors about that either. Unless we're running into another situation where that didn't get called for some reason. Let's do that. Restart. Never got called. Okay, so why did that happen? So we have load resources. So for some reason that got completely skipped over. Let's see, where was that? Here. So shadow render graph node initialize. We did set the function pointer here for this. Okay, so that is getting set. Yeah, but the node initialize is never getting called. Well. Why is that? Catch up on chat real fast. Respectable, that's fair. Yeah. Plus, you know, I do have a family, and I got tired of working 70 hours a week, and then having up to 3 hours of commuting a day on top of that. Just got old really fast. I think it'll be more fun in the end following your own vision. Exactly, right? Like, I think so at least. Yeah. Trash can talking about, you know, that editor that we have to do this for, you know, VS Code. Yeah. Trash can trying to get banned. No, we only use this guy for debugging in here, right? I do all my editing and programming in Vim. But yeah, we only use VS for debugging. It's a family-friendly stream, you know, so we can't have too much of this on there. Okay. So let me think about this. What would cause this node to not have its initialize be called? That does not make any sense to me. So when we do Kuju rating with a party of 21. Thank you so much. How is it going? How's your project going? If you guys aren't following Kuju, I highly recommend you go check out his project. He's building a pretty sweet looking project, and he's using Jai to do it. Have you looked at Rad Debugger? I daily drive it for C debugging. So I've heard about it, but it doesn't run on Linux yet, I don't think, does it? Raiders. Welcome, Raiders. We are in the middle of actually debugging a render graph issue. But I will give you guys the quick and dirty intro to what we're doing here. So we are building a game engine from scratch using C and Vulkan as our initial rendering backend. So it started off as a tutorial series on YouTube and morphed into a few different formats over the years. And eventually we landed on the live stream format here on Twitch. The reason I say that Vulkan is our initial rendering backend is because we do have plans to support Direct3D as well as Metal natively within the application. It is cross-platform. Even at the moment, it does run on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. It is completely open source and free. So it is available here on GitHub. It's Apache 2.0 licensed, which means that if you want to use it for any reason, whether it be independent or commercial, that's totally fine. All I ask is that you say that you used it, right? And so there will never be any sort of royalties or licensing fees of any kind. This engine will be 100% free always and forever. And it's pretty permissively licensed, right? So I don't require like GPL or anything like that, because that's just not how I roll. So the engine has been in development for a couple of years, but I say that with an asterisk because we do work on it part-time. So we've got a basic PBR pipeline up and running. We've got a whole bunch of systems up and running. We have audio working. We have the start of a UI system. We have the ability to manipulate objects around in the world and so forth, right? And so everything that we've built here is completely from scratch, with the exception of a few small utility files, libraries, which is like STB image and STB font, just because I didn't feel like writing font loading from complete scratch, right? True type font loading. Yeah, that is basically the overview. I'll drop a link here in chat for you guys. To the main website where you can get links to the GitHub, the Discord, YouTube, Twitch, Patreon, all that good stuff. And that's all in here. So we are in the middle of a big refactor effort right now, where we have redone a bunch of things in an effort to get rid of some tech debt that we acquired early on in the series. And so we're eliminating that bit by bit. And we are going through the process of kind of putting all that refactor back together and working out the bugs. So that's kind of where we're at. Let me catch up on chats. Spent all week implementing bullet physics and then learned yesterday bullet physics can't support stair stepping. So stayed up all night switching to physics. Oh man, that's painful. Is it just like they're never going to support it, or they just don't at the moment? Doesn't, but heard it's coming soon. Okay. You're gonna go. Okay. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate it. Keep working off stream. Have a good stream though. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by and welcome raiders. Observer Herb, first time. Well, no, not first time chatter. Raider rather. Hello. First time chat, Main Kenpix? I probably just completely butchered that, I'm sorry, but you used Next.gf for debugging on Linux and it was okay, small projects though. That is the issue, right? It works great for small projects, but I had issues with like just being able to like open a file and like slam in a breakpoint and say, here, run the application until you hit this, right? Like that's just not a fast process with that one. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I haven't really found one that works quite as well as this one. Not yet. I heard Rad Debugger is pretty good, but I don't think it runs on Linux yet. At least it didn't last time I looked it up. Let's see. I mean, it's an alpha too, so that's totally understandable, right? I mean, okay, so this is all Windows stuff specific. See, I'm not seeing anything in here about Linux. So yeah, unfortunately I can't use it, right? But yeah, it looks pretty sweet, but yeah, until it supports Linux, I can't really use it. Tom Stock, good to see you. Do you have a plan for what and when you'll make your game in your engine? I do have a plan for it, yes. It's basically a matter of we've got some semi-critical issues we have to figure out, including these bugs from this refactor, because this is an important factor of it. And then we're going to actually start creating the first game. And I suspect, especially since it's going to be the first game, even though it's going to be simple, we're probably going to find things along the way that are going to have to be adjusted in the engine along with developing the game. I expect there will be a lot of back and forth in that in the early days, and that's okay. That's kind of what we're expecting and accounting for, right? Does it work okay in Wine? There are a couple of issues. Yeah, but does it work? Like if it wants PDBs and all that stuff from like MSVC, like I don't compile with MSVC, right? I compile with Clang, so I don't know how well that'll work. There's a VS extension that simulates Vim. Not a Vim user, so I don't know if it works fine. I was not a fan of it. Straight up Vim is way better. It says in the README they were planning to have a Linux version, but only once the Windows 1 is ready, which is fair. Yeah. So it's still too early. Yep, exactly. So it looks like it's going to be a great debugger, but I can't use it. That being said, I could do all my development on Windows, but why would I do that when I can do it on Linux too? I just prefer working on Linux. I switch over to Windows when I have to port my changes to Windows, basically. And for testing, of course. Don't think they have dwarf support yet. Yeah, I don't think so. I didn't see anything in there listed about it. Someone who uses VS with that extension, I agree, it's not great. Yeah, I agree. I tried it and I was just like, I should just use Vim. Let's see. Will you stream the game making part 2? Yes, I will. So my plan with that is, and I haven't actually talked too much about this in general, but my plan with that is the first game, we're going to completely just open source the entire thing. We're going to do all the game development on stream, and that's going to include bouncing back and forth between the game and the engine, right? And we're going to do all of that live. And then the second game is probably going to wind up being the same thing, which will be another simple-ish game, but it'll have a little bit more complexity, require some more features from the engine. And we'll probably do that one live too. The third game that I have planned, though, is going to be much, much, much bigger. And it's going to have, story and all kinds of other systems in there. So there are going to be parts of that I will dev online, and then there are going to be lots of it that I'm not going to dev online, and I'm not going to open source the logic for that game because I don't want it to get spoiled, right? So that's the idea behind that. The bleeps are killing me. Yeah, it's a family friendly stream, and it's bad enough that the text for this is right here, but we can't just go around saying BS all the time and get away with it. It's got to be bleeped. Thank you for the tier 1 sub continuation, by the way. I appreciate that, RCW. Thank you. Will the first game be a 3D MMO or RPG? Of course it will be. That's the natural way of things, isn't it? Naturally, the first game I create with a brand new engine should be an MMO. I'm going to create a WoW killer. That's my goal, right? Let's create a WoW killer. WoW killer. Just make a Kickstarter for it and you're good. Easy peasy. Can it beat Far Cry? Yeah, there you go. It'll be a It'll be a WoW killer MMO RPG with Far Cry graphics. First game always has to be an MMO. I love it. I love it. You guys get where I'm coming from. All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. Not looking forward to ads though, which we have to break for, because the Bezos has to get his pay. So we will. We just, for those of you who are new, we break the stream whenever ads come up on Twitch, so that you guys don't actually miss anything, right? So in our case, that's we got a minute left on that. So we got just about 40 seconds left on ads, and then we will be able to continue. Almost done with ads. All right, ads are dead. Let's see. What's your best engine for that then? Yes. All of them. Just say you're making an MMO, but then just sit there and stare at code the entire stream and drink water. Yeah, or maybe just a completely blank, like, just not even have any code here, just like just an empty file, right? That's the way to do it. Perfect timing, yeah. Don't actually write anything, exactly, yep. VS is the greatest piece of software, and everything should be written in Electron. Oh, do I even want to read the rest of this sentence? Okay, I'm going to keep reading. Widular, you're trying to give me an aneurysm, I think. Everything should be written in Electron with 30 dependencies, and we need to make sure that they don't work on 3 or 4 major OSs. And make sure the size of the executable is 300 gigabytes minimum. Exclamation point 11, exclamation point. If it isn't taking over 70 minutes to compile, it's a bad project anyways. Hope Bezos got some money now. Oh, dude, that's... Yeah, you gave yourself an aneurysm typing that, I'll bet. Electron so light, so quick. Ugh. Yeah. It saddens me how much that's used. What do you mean 2 open CPP files on VS takes 2 gigabytes of RAM with faulty IntelliSense? Yeah, right. We should put out a bounty across Twitch, software dev community, to see who can create the best, worst plugin for VS. My nomination would be for a plugin PR that changes the title bar of the app so we can show it on stream. Think of the children. RCW, I love it. I might create an add-on for this just to change that. I'm sure it's possible. Electron, don't ship dependencies, ship the whole platform. Yeah, that is so true. It's ridiculous. Like, it just takes the meme of node modules to the extreme, right? Like, you guys have probably seen this one. Let me see if I can open just the image. All right. It's not letting me open just the image, but whatever. Anybody that's ever worked with that tech stack knows exactly what this means. Such a classic. Change it to not Vim. Yeah, there you go. That's perfect. One of my old projects from a while back was Game Engine in Electron. When I was but a wee lad. Can imagine it didn't go well. Yeah. I mean, it's possible, right? As long as it's not doing anything terribly complicated. There's a reason why SpaceX uses C and C++. You can't take node modules to Mars. You can't even take it off Earth. It's too heavy. Cargo is giving node modules a run for its money. I've heard that. And everybody's like, oh, Rust, it's going to, completely replace C and C++. And, no. I don't think so. It has its strengths, but Cargo ain't one of them. All right. Yeah, let's not start badgering Rust now. I said Cargo. But hey, I mean, a lot of people associate the two, do they not? Cargo was made for 300 dependencies. Rust devs are quite literally torturing it. Spiro. Node modules are the porta potties of JS devs, and everyone likes to dump in it. Yeah, that's so true, Spiro. Yep, 100%. There's a reason JS devs like Rust. Oof. That hurt from observation to just watch. That one hurt. Who let Spiro in? Yeah, he's a mod in here. Can you believe that? Can you believe that, Sergeant Pepper? He's a mod. Let's see. So that's how the Earth... so that's how the Earth-only supporters can hamper my Mars colony growth. Just send them convenient node packages. Yep, 100%. Too funny. You guys cracking me up tonight. What do you mean, works on my machine? Yep. All right. So what I'm not understanding is why. So our render graph create does node resolve. Okay, so this is the resolution, finalization, and then load resources. But we never actually... we never actually hooked into the initialization routines, did we? So let me think about that. So finalization is where we set up the dependency graph and link all the nodes and make sure that they're executed in the right order. So I guess after that would be where we need to perform initialization. Because we're not actually initializing these things anywhere. So I've got to tie this in somewhere. So for all the nodes, do we actually... I think we should have a separate entry point for this instead of hooking it into something. that already exists. Render graph system initialize. This is what hooks that stuff up. Execute frame. This is the execution. Load resources. I guess we could put it here, right? And it's basically going to be a carbon copy of this, actually. So we'll say render graph initialize, which is going to be the graph initialization, not to be confused with the system initialization, which is separate. So that's going to loop through all of the nodes and then say if it has initialize, then call it. Initialize node. Right, and then load resources. So that's here. Which I guess we could just do this. Right, so we could do that. Oh, I think I have to do we need to add this to the header. So here, all right. So in theory, okay, that's just us setting the function pointer. We can get rid of that. Here we go. So here's the initialization, which is where we should be able to get the shader. Yep. Okay, so now we should be good. We'll probably get a little further and then we'll hit something else that we haven't hit before, which is what I expected. Okay, so these are always fun to parse. VK create image create info rather. Sample depth stencil. Okay, so this is for depth image. Oh, this is probably the shadow map actually. Wait, what? Includes a frame buffer attachment bit and image width. 35,768 exceeds frame buffer max frame buffer width. Well, right, yeah, it's obviously going to be less than that. But why is that so huge? It's got to be garbage data, I guess. Okay. So my guess is we probably just didn't fill in a size somewhere, and it's just using whatever default garbage data it actually has sitting around. Not a huge deal. All right. However, that being said, unfortunately, we are out of time tonight because I do have to get up early in the morning for work. So this is where we're going to have to leave it for tonight. However, we did make some progress, so I'm going to push these changes from tonight and last night up so that you guys have them. So this is all the stuff that we've updated between last night and tonight. So we actually touched quite a lot of stuff. We'll say fixed various bugs within render graph and 9 slice loading. Yeah, that's good. Stick with that. Cool. All right, so that is at least pushed up to the branch. So if you guys did want, or you're following along and you did want the code updates, it's at least there. Okay. I got some comments to catch up on here real fast. Okay, so question is, thank you by the way for the follow. The question is, what's with all the talks about how bad C and C++ are, and that there's this new wonderful languages, but then you find out no one really uses them? Yeah. Sounds like it's a lot of complaining about people do Western music theory, where there are all these great and even better systems, but then you don't see anyone using them, at least not enough to justify any amount of hype. Yeah, so like, I mean, Rust is pretty popular, right? So there are a decent amount of people using it, but like, there's nowhere near the amount of people using Rust that use C and C++ out there combined. There's no way. So yeah, I would tend to agree. And then you get, BS things out there like, oh, the White House says use memory safe languages instead. But I can guarantee you the people that wrote that stuff don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? The people that released that don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the implications of that. What are these nodes? Nodes. Are you talking about the nodes that that I keep referencing here? The nodes are actual render graph nodes. So our app configuration allows us to set up a render graph, which it in turn essentially sets up how a single frame is rendered. And we have these render graph nodes that control a certain aspect of that particular frame within that render graph, right? So we have a begin frame, something that gathers resources for the beginning of the frame. We have one that clears the color buffer, one that clears the depth buffer. We have one that draws the skybox, one that draws our shadow maps for the scene. Then we have our forward node, which uses output from the skybox, the clear depth buffer, and the shadow map. And then we have a debug layer that draws on top of that. We have the standard UI layer that draws as well. And then we have a frame end, which ultimately is what submits the thing for presentation. And so all of these nodes have different dependencies that are looked at and gathered and used to make sure that these things are executed in the right order. So they're not necessarily executed in the way that they're provided here, but the sources and sinks within each one of these guys in terms of how the actual resources are passed around are used to dynamically figure out what order these should actually be used in. So I hope that answers the question. Odin's being used in commercial software in a lot of games. Yep, I've seen it quite widely used. Jai as well. Some commercial software being developed in it too. Yep. God, I haven't looked at Randy's game in forever. I have to look at that. I'll have to look. I haven't looked at his channel in forever, actually. While you're doing real programming, I'm sitting here fixing my NeoVim theme. I get that. I mean, I've spent hours doing that myself, so I totally understand it. Also, to add to the games list, Fat Goblins. Yep, that's Kuja's game. Which wish list that if you haven't already. In fact, I think it's an awesome looking game. let me grab the link. If you guys haven't checked out that game, definitely check it out. It's a pretty neat looking game. I would say wish list it for sure. Help a guy out. Let's see. All right. RCW, have a good evening. Yep. Perfect. I'm going to be probably raiding here in just a second. Do you have any demo scenes to show? I don't, unfortunately, at the moment. Our engine is in the middle of a refactor. Well, close to the end of a refactor, actually. But it does not actually run at the moment. So the best I could do is actually show a couple of screenshots. And I'll do this real quickly, and then I'm going to end the stream for tonight. Let me pull it up. So yeah, here's a couple. They're kind of old screenshots at this point, but here's a couple of shots of the test bed running. Right. So we have cascading shadow maps, PBR pipeline, some basic lighting stuff in here, the ability to edit stuff, draw debug shapes, handle text. We've got our own custom UI system. We've got a plugin system that works. We've got audio. So there's a lot of things that we can't necessarily show this way. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff. I'll drop a link here in chat if you're interested in reading up a little bit more. And that'll take you to kohiengine.com, which is sort of the sort of central hub for the project, right? Okay. Yeah, RCW, that sounds awesome. I look forward to hearing about it. Yeah, I appreciate that. Don't shoot me. I appreciate that. And welcome, by the way, first-time chatter. Welcome. All right, so let's see who we can raid. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Okay. So I think I know who I'm going to raid, but I just want to have a very quick look through who else is on at the moment. Okay. I'm going to raid Jitspo. I'm not sure what he's doing at the moment, but he is working on a pretty awesome looking FPS, like a retro FPS. And I'm really, I really like the style of the game that he's putting together, and he's making it in Godot. So it's definitely a pretty cool looking project. And yeah, so we're gonna raid him tonight, and yeah, I will catch you guys on the next stream. So thanks so much for being here. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to follow me on Twitch and or YouTube. It helps me grow the channel, reach more people, and hopefully get more people into game engine dev, right? So anyways, that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you guys, and I will see you guys next time.